Hey everyone, so in this episode of Make It with Calvin, I'm going to be giving you my opinions on this, the Artillery 3D Hornet. Before I end up giving it to Ashley over at Chip Builds, I've promised her this thing for pretty much ever. And finally, I'm going to make good on that. So let's talk about it before it goes off to her and joins the Brent farm. Okay, so first of all, I want to make it very clear, as I've tried to make it very clear for a long time, the Hornet, I believe, was more designed for a makerspace or a school environment versus a hobby DIY, I'm going to upgrade the living crap out of everything setting, which is, personal opinions there. That being said, I actually have to say I really, really like this machine. And it's not just because it has the really slick aesthetics with these really cool injection molded yellow parts. I have to say, for an entry-level machine, this thing is pretty nice, although there are a couple of caveats I will mention. Now, first of all, when it comes to the machine, it just has a basic LCD with the thumb wheel. I did notice that sometimes the thumb wheel was a little bit iffy. This was a very early on production machine, so from what I've heard, that has been fixed, so it's not that big of a deal. It uses a regular SD card, which I personally prefer over a micro SD card. I do wish it had the ability to also do a USB stick, but then again, some people like SD cards, people like USB sticks. Everybody has their own opinion, so big deal. Now, moving on from there, we have this simple side-mounted spool holder, which is actually pretty nice. I must admit, it just snaps in place. Come on. There we go. One thing to keep in mind, though, is if you're going to run a really large spool, this might not work for you. Also, keep in mind that the diameter of this is pretty big. Some spools still have very tiny centers, especially small sample ones, so make sure on that. But then again, spool holders are something that you can always print or run off the machine, or you get the idea. Oops, let me, come on. There we go. Let me get that in there. It can be a little bit tricky to get in, but once it's in, it's no big deal. Now, when we come to the bed, this is just your typical super plate, I believe carbide bed material. It has the glass is glued to an aluminum plate, and you have some insulation underneath. I will note this is a 24-volt bed. I do wish it was a mains bed just because they heat up faster, but then again, this machine probably shouldn't be printing anything above 235, 240C, which would be PETG or similar materials. So then again, having a mains bed, probably not necessary. I did stick some build tack on top just because I'm a big fan of that for making print stick. That's just personal opinion there, but whatever. That being said, it does have 4 leveling knobs, and when you're running the bed leveling, you can do simple 4-point leveling, but it also has built-in manual mesh leveling, which is nice. Personally, on a machine of this size, I don't really think that is necessary, but I know that there's going to be someone in the comments section who's going to argue differently, so whatever. It's actually really nice that they included it in there. I think that's a very nice touch. So points to Artillery for that. You do not have to use it though, but just mentioning it. So moving on up. All right, sorry if the lighting on this is a little bit bad, but moving on up, we have the hot end assembly. Now this thing is pretty nice. It has dual blowers here on the side. They're the squirrel cage type. And then we have a single fan on the front that cools the hot end. Then we have the simple heat block underneath. And then we have the slightly controversial, but I actually kind of like it, the umbilical cord here. Now, a thing to keep in mind is both the power and the Bowden tube run through this. So some people had commented about the fact that, well, what if you had something break off inside, or could you change the tubing inside? From what people have told me, yeah, you can change the tubing inside. If you did have a piece break off in there, what you can always do is you can just turn the machine on, heat it up, let it sit for a minute, turn the machine off, unscrew this, and pull whatever you need out. There's going to be more than enough residual heat in there to get things done. Now, the other thing that I like about the tube being integral to the power line is this is very stiff. Normally on a Bowden machine, a lot of the movement that you have with the retraction goes into doing this with the tube, and that's not very efficient. The other thing that's really nice inside here is the fact that this tube up here is completely separate from the PTFE that's in the hot end. So the nice thing is this tube in here should realistically last almost indefinitely. And if you have to change out the hot end, it's pretty much just a little assembly. So you can either take it apart and change the PTFE, or you can just pull out the little hot end thermistor heat block assembly, pull it out, pop a new one in, relevel your bed, all's well and dandy. Also, this head is held on by 3 Allen screws. So in the worst case scenario, if you're working in a school or a makerspace and you need to get the machine back online very quickly, you can just pull the whole thing off, pop a new one on, you're good to go. And moving over, now moving over, we have just a simple Titan style extruder with an extruder arm. I will mention that my arm eventually did crack, but I will also say I was intentionally not very nice on my arm, and I was told by Tracy over at Artillery that at the time they were still having a problem with a couple of the old, more brittle arms still being in stock and accidentally getting placed on machines. I just went on Amazon and bought a new arm. Took me all of 10 minutes to install it. The thing that is nice about this setup though is 4 screws and you have instant access to the extruder. Just be mindful of the fact that there is a small spring inside and a screw and a nut. Those do get lost if you're not careful, but something to keep in mind. So overall, what are my impressions on the machine? I gotta say, for an entry-level machine or something that is user-friendly, it's pretty nice. Now, please keep in mind, because this is a Bowden setup, I've seen a lot of people talking about, oh, can I convert my Bowden machine to a direct drive? Go buy a Genius or a Genius Pro. I'm serious. It's not to say that you can't print flexibles on this machine. If they're very stiff, you can, but I wouldn't recommend doing it. Even trying to do flexibles on my Ultimaker 2 back in the day was a bit hit and miss, and even on a direct drive machine, doing flexibles can be a bit hit and miss. So, realistically speaking, I would say this is a PLA PETG only machine, but that's not a bad thing if that's all you intend to print. And mostly in a school or a makerspace setting, that's pretty much all you're going to be printing, because that stuff's cheap, easy to print, and that's what you really want. The other thing I will say is the fact that you do have the spool holder off to the side. If you're trying to stick the machines really close together, you might want to figure out something else for a spool holder setup. But overall, I gotta say the machine is really nice. It does have a 32-bit board inside, which is nice. I've personally not noticed any real print quality differences between a 32-bit board and the original 8-bit board, although I will say the 32-bit board is a bit quieter when the machine is running, just in terms of the acceleration. As for the noise on this thing, I'm sorry, but anybody who complains that this thing is loud, you should go sit next to my old Ultimaker 2, or heck, even my Thingomatic, and I think within about 2 minutes you're going to be crying, saying, okay, I'm sorry, this thing is actually really quiet. It is quiet by 3D printer standards, especially if you remember back in the day before silent drivers came out, and we were putting our machines on ping pong balls to try and make them quieter. So that's my thoughts on the machine. Feel free to comment yours down below. I will not be responding to people constantly talking about the tube assembly in a negative light. I already explained how you can work around that. So if you can't figure that out, go buy another machine. See you guys here next time on Make It Go with Calvin.